Hey, I'm Coach T. Welcome back to another one of my Python quick code videos. This is a video that was requested by a viewer talking about the Python logical operators. And I'll tell you what, even though I use these things in C Sharp pretty often now in my practice, these logical operators, this video in Python made me go back to my fundamentals, and it was a good reminder of how much there is to learn by review. So if you're not sure, like, okay, why is this guy who says he's an advanced beginner, why is he teaching Python stuff on YouTube? Well, I learn a lot by teaching. I learn what I don't know when I'm trying to explain something simply, and I realize I don't know it that well. So this is a great opportunity for me to do some more research, to learn a little bit more about how Python works, about how programming works. And I made a couple goofy little mistakes that I'm going to warn you about in this hopefully like 10-ish minute long video. So I make these videos for not for advanced beginners. I make these videos for adult learners like myself, maybe adolescents who are trying to get into programming, but are having a hard time getting over the rocks. And they kind of want some guidance that's going to be respectful of where they're coming from, that's going to be sensitive to the frustration, and is very focused on one thing at a time. That's what I do very well because in my day job, I'm a coach. I work with people, with adults to guide their learning, to guide reflection, and improve their efficacy and their confidence in what they do. That's what I love doing. And teaching people or helping people to learn to program is an extension of my passion. So if you like this kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. And we're going to get into a very interesting, kind of tricky topic that will help you improve your flow control. So the big idea here is looking at this is going to drive me crazy, or operators, logical operators in Python. And there are a lot of logical operators. There's greater than and equals to, there's exactly equal to, not equal to, in, not in, and then there are our common and ors. And we use and ors to control the flow of information through a program to evaluate whether certain things are true, and then if so, do something about it. Or if they're false, do something else about it. They're very important in building out your basic software. They're some of your key Legos. And they're in every programming language. You're going to see it all the time. The nice thing about Python and many modern languages, but Python in particular, is that in Python, we actually write them with just the and the or. In C Sharp, I would have to type two ampersands or two whatever these vertical marks are. That would cue the compiler to say this is an and or this is an or, but Python sticks to English syntax. And for a beginner, that makes things a lot simpler because you don't have to remember these different symbols or signs. So let's be glad that Python gives us a very English-like syntax and check out what they do. There are two key functions for these and or operators, and you're going to be using them in the context of an if statement, a conditional. If this is true and this is true, or if this is true or this is true, then do something. Control the flow that way. You're always going to be using these in the case of conditionals. So for and, all conditions listed must be true. And I said all instead of both because you could have more than two. You could say, if the car is red and the car has gas and I have the keys and I'm in the seat and I have nowhere to be, then I'll take a drive. So now I've got a bunch of different conditionals stacked. But if I'm not in the car, or I don't have the keys, or there's no gas in the car, well then I can't take a drive, right? Something's missing that prevents me from being able to do that. So with the and condition, you have all of them must evaluate to true. If any condition evaluates to false, the whole thing collapses. And that's a key concept that we need is short circuiting. So if there are any conditions that I suspect might be true, or false rather, that might fall through, then I want to put those up front. Because if the whole thing is a daisy chain of possibilities that are likely to be true, but I put the one that is likely to evaluate false at the end, it means I wasted all that computational power to figure out, is this true, is this true, is this true? Oh, that's false. The whole thing's a waste of time. So we have this concept of short circuiting in programming. I learned more about it in C Sharp, but I see how it works in Python as well. If one of those conditions evaluates to be false in a chained and statement, then the whole thing is a waste. So put your likely to be false or the less certain statements up front. That way you can save the computational and processing power by having it just evaluate false and the program can move on. It's just something to keep in mind with your AND statements. They're not all made equal, right? On the other side, we have the OR statement. Any single condition must be true. That's all that is. So that means like if I have food in the fridge or I have money in my pocket, then I will eat dinner. If I don't have food in the fridge, but I have money in my pocket, I'll just order out. If I have food in the fridge, I'm just going to eat in, right? So either of those can evaluate to true, and I will in turn then be able to eat dinner, which sounds great. It is almost noon here, and I'm getting a little peckish. So the OR operator gives us a lot more flexibility, but we do need to be careful to keep track of where the most likely variables are that will evaluate true. We want to front load those because as soon as it evaluates to true, the rest of it doesn't matter. It will now evaluate to true. So the opposite of the AND statement where I want the likely to be false ones up front so we can short circuit that way. With the OR operator, we want the likely to be true ones up front so we can short circuit it and get moving with our program, right? Once we get into this stuff, we're starting to look at becoming more efficient, more terse, more Pythonic in some ways, because when you're writing bigger software, you might have millions of calculations going on all at once, and you have a tech debt where if something's slow here and something's slow here, something's slow here, and it's not well optimized, you're going to be paying for that somewhere. It's going to slow your program down. It's going to be less efficient. The user is going to be delayed, and a delay of a couple seconds really sucks for a user because we're so used to being lightning fast. So you do want to be planning ahead and trying to think about what is the most efficient way that these statements, these and or statements, can be evaluated. That will help reduce the tech debt as you're building increasingly complicated software. So, okay, I did say I made a couple goofy mistakes. I learned a lot in this video. I'm very glad that it was recommended that I do it because you know what? The next time I sat down to write a Python script, I might have screwed this up because you use and or quite a fair bit. So here's my mistake right here. I'm going to zoom in. There it is. Control B to close that. And I'm going to show you the mistake that I made. This is the mistake that I made. The problem here is that an individual string in Python will evaluate to be truthy. It has a truth value because it's not null. It's not empty. So this is true. What it's doing is it's saying, is this true? Well, yes, it's a string. And is this true? That A equals boy. And in this case, it's person 1 equals boy. So I was getting a logical error and I was scratching my head going, what is going on here? So let me back up a little bit. I'm going to rewrite this to be the correct syntax so that we can evaluate these things properly. I'll walk you through how my function works. And I'm going to show you something really, really important. So, okay, there it is right there. Oops, we don't need that colon. Okay, so when we are writing a control statement using logical operators and an OR, we have to write out the whole logical statement like this. You need to have both conditions clearly laid out. Python does not read it the same way that we do. Although this would read like typical syntax to you or me, if A and B is exactly equal to boy, Python doesn't see it that way. It sees if A has value, in this case is a string, it evaluates to 1, or it has a non-null value, it's therefore true. So it's saying if this is true and this is true. This is almost acting like it's in parentheses on its own, right? We don't want that. So you need to do it this way. And you might be able to do it this way. This might work, but I don't think it's as readable. And readability should probably take precedence when you're coding because somebody else might be working through your code. And if they're going, what on earth is this phrasing that they used? Well, readability probably would have been the better way to go. So now we're saying if A is exactly equal to boy and B is exactly equal to boy, then we're going to print both boys, right? And here are my variables. So I define the function up front. Now I've got my variables, person 1, person 2, person 3. And you can see for the A slot, the A parameter, I'm passing in the argument person 1. So boy fills in there, and this will evaluate to boy. Person 2 is also boy, and then passing this through. So when I run this, I would expect to see both boys. There it is, both boys right here. Okay, that's not super strange, right? And I know I did have somebody ask, well, how come I can't just do this on another video and have the exact same parameter names? That you can, especially if you know exactly what you're doing. It makes absolutely no difference, right? But what if I now go person 3? Well, now person 3 is the argument for the person 2 parameter. You get a little bit less readable. So for the sake of illustration, I'm going to leave it to A and B. Okay. So now I've got person 1 passing in for A, which is boy, and I'm checking to see is person 3 exactly equal to boy. Well, pause for a second. Think about how would this evaluate. Let's check it out. Not both boys, right? That is the else statement branch. What if, on the flip side, I do or? What do you think will happen? Well, it evaluates to both boys, right? Why? Because A is a boy. And this is the appropriate way to do it, right? With short circuiting, I put the likely to be true one up front. But you might ask, and this is what I encourage you to do, play with the code, see what happens by changing things around. What would happen right now? Well, remember that it doesn't matter what order these are in. It does not need to be the same order as the arguments are passed in. This stores the value assigned here. So it's up front, so it's B. And it's going to say, okay, is B boy or A is that boy? Well, I'm still going to get both boys. Why am I still getting both boys? Because A is true. B is false, but we're using the OR operator right now. And for OR, only one condition, any single condition must be true. What if I change it to AND? Okay, well now all conditions must be true. What do you think will happen? Not both boys. Okay, so what happened there? Well, this evaluates to false and it just terminates it, right? So that's the AND and the OR operator in the context of a fairly simple function, right? It is tricky periodically, and you've got to be very careful to write out your expressions separately. I recommend, personally, I prefer, because C# enforces this on me, and I think it's a good habit, putting them in parentheses. It just clearly lays it out for you, especially when you're getting started. You can clearly see what's being evaluated. Is this true and is this true? I like this personally. It's not necessary, as you can see. Let's do a quick thought experiment here. Let's just see what happens if I do combine them both like this. Get rid of that. All right, so let's run it and see. So we're saying if both A and B equal boy. Right now, person 3 is B. So I would predict we'd get not both boys, but I'm not totally sure how this is going to evaluate. I think we might even get an error. Not both boys. Okay. What if we change this to person 2? And we'll run it again. Both boys. Okay. All right. Very interesting. So it does work that way. I would want to play with it and really, really, really carefully test that to make sure it functions the way I think it functions. But if it's working, if you're comfortable with it, then go for it. I just would prefer readability, which is why I use a lot of parentheses, because most of my practice is C# at this point, and there's a lot of parentheses. There's a lot of curly braces and semicolons too. So there you go. And or operator. Video's a little bit long, but I did want to be very careful to highlight one of the common mistakes that I make and I see other people making with not sufficiently laying out your logical clauses. I would recommend doing it like, where is it? I had it at one point. All right, laying it out like that, okay? And put them in parentheses. If you're finding often that you're struggling and that this is backfiring on you, put them in parentheses. It will help you. They're like your bumpers, right? So there you go. If you like this kind of video where we focus on one skill, one topic, one theme at a time, consider subscribing to the Coach T channel. And I will see you in the next Python Quick Code video. Peace.